morning, Hilmar Covenant. It is so wonderful to see all of you. My goodness, it is a joy for my wife Reese and I to be with you this morning. Many people ask, I imagine, I don't know if this is something that is common, but people were asking us this morning. They said, is this your first time to Hilmar? The answer is no. We've been to Hilmar many times over the years. We have some friends that grew up in Hilmar and frequently would come out here and swim at their parents' place, and farmers out here, almond farmers actually. And so we have a lot of great connections to this great city and have been here many times, but this is our first time at Hilmar Covenant. And so it's a joy, just a total joy to be here. We've been so impacted already by those of you who've had a chance to meet and the staff of this incredible church that have been continuing to lead this church during this remarkable season. So again, thank you so much for having us. Again, my name is Skei. My wife Reese and I are here this morning. We have two daughters. They are Cadence and Kaylin. They are 15 and 13. Yeah, it's it's a challenge. They're working things out in us that Jesus can only do through two teenagers, and it's good. I'm thinking about and I'm so grateful for this passage being read this morning out of John 13 as we reflect a little bit more on the marks of a disciple. I've been thinking a lot more because as the father and as parents of a 13-year-old and a 15, thinking a lot more as I get older and as they get older about kind of the end of life. Thinking a lot more about what I want to leave behind, what kind of legacy I want to leave. I don't know if that resonates with some of you who are here this morning, but I reflect on this more than I ever have, and I suspect that the older I get and as our kids get closer and closer to going away to college, that will be true in the coming years. I'm wondering what things are the most important. There are a lot of things. The question for me, for my wife, is what are the most important things that the time that we have left that we want to instill in our children and in those that we're connected to. If I can just sort of draw a little parallel between where we are in our stage and season of life and perhaps even where Jesus was in John 13. If you can give me a little bit of latitude and allow me to connect where we are with where Jesus was in John 13, I would submit to you this morning that Jesus viewed this John 13 passage as a bit of his final discourse. It was his last will and testament, if you will. This is Jesus sharing his concluding remarks, his culminating thoughts with death knocking at his door. He knew he was going to die, and with his disciples following this meal, he says to them, I give you this new commandment, and it is that you would love one another. Now, Jesus calls this a new commandment. I don't know if that strikes you as strange. He calls it a new commandment, but these aren't new words, friends. These are not new words. These are words that were included in the Mosaic covenant in Leviticus 19, to love one another. And yet Jesus, very strangely, very oddly, refers to these words as his new covenant. He says to them, I'm going to leave you with this. This is a new commandment. I want you to love one another. This isn't new. This is not new. It's not new at all to his disciples. Why then? If you are theologically curious at all, I think that you would then present to Jesus, or at least bring to this text, the question, how can Jesus refer to this command to love one another as new when in fact it wasn't new at all? Well, the key I would submit to you today is really the exchange that follows. It's the exchange that follows. You can't just stop at verse 35. It's the exchange that follows that I think is sort of the key. It's the indicator of why and how Jesus can refer to these words, this commandment, as new, when in fact the words themselves were not new at all. Jesus has this exchange beginning in verse number 36 with Simon Peter. You all know it very well. It says this, in my translation, it says, Peter says to Jesus, Lord, where are you going? Because Jesus said, I'm not going to be with you much longer. So Peter says, where are you going? Jesus says, well, I'm going where you can't follow me right now, but you will follow me afterward. And Peter said to him, why can I not follow you now? I'll lay down my life for you. Jesus said, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly I say to you, the rooster shall not crow until you've denied me 3 times. This phrase particularly, I mean, we're trying to figure out how Jesus can refer to something old as something new when he's really just sort of saying the same thing that they've known and carried with them for generations. There's this phrase, he says, where I'm going you cannot follow now, but you will follow me later. That's the phrase I think that we need to sort of hone in on. It's the phrase that gives us the key. It's the phrase that sort of indicates how it is Jesus can refer to something old as something new when all he's doing is saying, in essence, the same thing. When Jesus gives his disciples this new commandment, as he calls it in John 13, he says, as I have loved you, you must love one another. Jesus, again, you know this, was about to die. The master was about to lay down his life for his servants. The shepherd was about to sacrifice his life for his sheep. And here's the thing. In Jewish thought, your life, I'm talking about your life was always to take precedence over the life of another. In Jewish thought, over the life of another. Rabbi Akiva is recorded saying this. He's recorded making this argument at about the same time that John was recording, was writing, was penning his gospel. About the same time, Rabbi Akiva makes this argument. It's documented as having done this. But Jesus is about to lay his life down for others. Jewish thought was your life takes precedence over everybody else's, but Jesus is about to lay his life down on behalf of others. And he says to Peter, he says, and you, by the way, the you is not singular. He's not talking just to Peter. The you is plural. He's talking about all of his disciples. He says, and you will follow me later. You see, what makes this a new commandment, it's not the new words. What makes this a new commandment is that it amounts to a renewed word. Jesus isn't defining love, he's redefining love. The idea that Christians would be characterized by our self-sacrificial, lay our lives down, let go of power, existence in this world, renews our call to be faithful disciples. Jesus wasn't inviting them into something they didn't know. He was re-inviting them. It was a renewed call with a redefined love to be faithful disciples. Now, I would argue, and listen, I'm from Fresno. We're going to drive back an hour 15. You may never see me again. So you know what? You don't have to agree with me. I'm going to make an argument here. And my argument from a Fresno version, you know what? This may only be true in Fresno. May not be true in Hilmar. But in Fresno, I'm going to argue that over the last 5 years, the church has been challenged on this very point over and over again, only to be found attempting to actually save our own lives, and hold on to power. But in the process, we've discovered that Jesus has been right. That when you try to save your life, you surely lose it. And from where I stand, by the way, I'm standing right here. Where I stand, The church over the past 5 years has become more insular. Painting with a broad brush here, but I think the church has become more judgmental. I think the church has become more binary in our reasoning and less gracious in our theological discourse. And specifically over the past 16 months, painting with a broad brush, I don't know what's true for Hilmar Covenant. Over the last 16 months, we've seen giving decline. Painting with a broad brush in the church more broadly in the United States. We've seen engagement decrease. And now, right now, people are getting vaccinated, but people are not returning to the churches that they've been part of for decades. The pandemic has revealed so much about our society, including society's value for the role of the church within it. As a whole, church attendance is decreasing in the United States, and literally churches are shutting the doors every week. We have a little perspective on that. I mean, we're connected to churches. We've got about 500 churches in Fresno. We're connected to our body, and we're seeing churches shut their doors nearly every week. We're connected denominationally. We're connected nationally. We're seeing churches shut their doors nearly every week. However, where we have seen growth and where we've seen vibrancy in both rural and urban contexts is when a church prioritizes their relationships with God and with one another. That is where we've seen fruit. When a church knows the principle of their elementary school and finds ways to encourage the teachers during the hardest year of their professional careers. When the church sees a struggling ministry partner in town, and even though the church is going through its own struggles, still comes alongside of them to help them clean up their facility. When a church works with other churches from other denominations to host a vaccination event in an effort to ensure that COVID doesn't take the lives of members of its community. When the church sees the people of its community and prioritizes its relationship with them, we have seen tremendous fruit. We've seen vibrancy. We've seen renewal. We've seen some early indications of revival. We've seen new families joining, and we've seen people coming to faith in Jesus. That is where we're seeing vibrancy and renewal happening. Brothers and sisters of Hilmar Covenant Church, I submit to you this morning that loving one another is not one of many things to be prioritized in this demanding season. I submit to you that in the words of Dr. John Perkins, that literally love is the final fight. Love is the final fight. You may be fighting a whole lot of other battles right now, but love is the final fight. Jesus, as he has death sort of creeping in on his door, says, I have one final thing that I want to share with you. These are my final words. This is sort of the last thing you're going to hear from me, and I'm going to call it a new commandment because I'm going to renew your call to the final fight. Love one another. Love one another. We may not get our politics right, but we have got to get our love right. We may not select the right pastor, but we've got to get love right. We may not breed cattle like Dick Klaus does in Hilmar, but we can love like Jesus. And he said we'd follow him. You can follow him even when you're alone. All by yourself, you can follow him. You can follow even if you didn't get your child tax credit payment. You can follow him. You can follow him even when you're young, and you can follow him when you're old. You can follow him when you're working for $15 an hour, and you can follow him when you're working for $50 an hour. It doesn't matter. You can follow him. Jesus said we would follow. Now I'm thinking about what I want to leave my children before they head off to college. And I'm realizing with my wife that more than any other, I want them to know how to love. I want them to know how to love. I want to model a love that will sacrifice itself. I want to model a love that gives until the very end. I want them to see how you can love your neighbors in their worst moments. When they're intoxicated, when they're fighting, when they have no hope. I want them to see what love looks like. Church, I came this morning just simply, if I could, my hope is and my prayer is that I would be a source of encouragement for you right now. In this season, to focus on getting love right. It's the final fight. While politicians are fighting to get reelected, while your dentist is focused on not getting sued, while your business is focused on being sustainable, and the Phoenix Suns are focused on not getting eliminated from the playoffs, the church is called to focus on love. Brothers and sisters, the future of Hilmar as a city and as a community that each of you has invested your lives in, it's not determined by future sales tax revenue. It's not determined by farmland. It's not even determined by Dairy Princess titles. The one factor that will secure the future of Hilmar is the decree to which Hilmar Covenant Church and the larger body of Christ will be able to exemplify, you know it, love. Love your neighborhood real good. Love your schools. Love your elected representatives. Love your business community. Love is the final thing. And sisters and brothers, Jesus said we would follow. For the sake of our families, our churches, and our community, I certainly hope Jesus was right. It is our call, it's our commitment, it is our privilege. This is the mark of discipleship. This is how we are known, by our love for one another. Let me pray. Father, we thank you for this morning and for your word. We receive it as holy and sacred. We receive it as alive, sharper than a double-edged sword. God, I pray even now in this moment that your word would penetrate our hearts. That God, you would shape our spirit. That God, we would not be so focused on theological precision that we miss love, but rather when we love, we demonstrate our theology. Father, I pray that we would be not so concerned about being right in every relationship, but God, we would be right in our relationships. Father, would we love? Would we love in a renewed way? Would we love in a self-sacrificing way? Would we love in a way that is willing to lay ourselves down